Welcome to Dinner for Two. I'm Stanley.
And I'm Kathy. And we are back. We are excited about this episode because it is one that has come up a lot in conversations that we've had with folks, with people. So I want to open this episode up by saying, open your minds and let's talk. Let's talk a little bit. So this episode is called Going Deeper, Love, Loss, and Life After the Noise. And when we say noise, we're talking about the noise of life, the noise of things that are going on with you, things that are going on around you, and what happens when that's gone. Because those things provide so much of a distraction in relationships for forever, for a long time, and for years and years and years and years and years. And then they all of a sudden stop. One person retires, one person changes the way that they are doing things, one person decides that, maybe both people retire or children are gone or whatever. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk about what loss really looks like. And then how to revitalize so that you end up in a good space when changes happen in your relationship, when changes happen in the way that you do life together. So let's get it. Let's talk. So when the house gets quiet, life gets loud. What do you think about that?
It's a natural evolution, but the transition can be difficult if you have not had a conversation about it. So you definitely need to have a conversation about what's next, what next steps looks like in every relationship.
I think it also gets loud when you don't have a real connection to the person and when you have built your life around the things that you do as opposed to the people that you are, the people who you are and how you connect together. When your relationship has been built around getting things done, dealing with the children, maneuvering careers and those kinds of things, when those things slow down and there's no real relationship or your relationship has been more transactional and has devolved into a place where you exist together, it gets hard when those things are no longer a part of who you are and what you're doing together.
Well, it can be hard. So that's what we're saying. You need to make sure that you make the adjustment and that you actually have a conversation about it so that you guys can transition more easily into the next phase of whatever it is that you're planning to do.
You said make the adjustment. I think the adjustments happen. I think the adjustments in life happen. They just happen. Kids get older. They move away. Careers change. Jobs change. Job responsibilities change. Retirement happens. Those kinds of things happen. And I think that for me, what I'm seeing is the bigger issue is not having a strong relationship, the two of you, a relationship that isn't so transactional, that when you're left with when you're left with nothing to do and you're left with no one to do things for, what do you have? What's under that? And I think that's when it gets tough, when there isn't anything built along the way, or there isn't an intentional effort to build along the way, so that when you do wake up and it's just you looking at each other, that you're not looking for something to make you feel valued in that space or make you feel as though that the relationship itself is what's there, that it's left and it's a strong relationship, that those other things were things that you did, but you didn't neglect the relationship along the way. So I think as you're moving to these stages, that you have to remember that you have to be intentional about building the relationship, being friends with the person that you're going to end up living with when all the noise goes away.
Okay. I didn't know. Seems like to me that's a transition to something different. I thought we were talking about the noise goes away, and that noise being the things that you were doing regularly. And then now you have a new quiet. So I'm thinking about transitioning into that quiet and what that looks like, because now that's generally it's going to wind up being two different people, because you were doing and you weren't really being before. You were just kind of doing, and it was a noise of life that was transitioned, that you had to transition from, and then to a different area. So when I was talking about transition, I wasn't talking about anything that related to any feelings. I was talking about managing that move from all of the things that you did to what are you going to do now, and then what's going to be attached to that. So,
and that's the doer. That's the doer, because I think you can't do it in the absence of feelings. Because again, if the relationship is not strong, then you feel there's a loss that occurs when you are transitioning, and you don't feel a connection with that person that's left behind when all the stuff is gone. So I think it can't be, I think it's and not or. I think you have to, we can't talk about it in absence of feelings, because you have to have some feelings about and with the person that you're left with when all of the busyness goes away.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever eliminated feelings. I think feelings, we've talked about that 100 times before, is that was the issue before, is that you were doing, but you weren't feeling. And so, yeah, feelings have to be a part of it. Additionally, the point I was attempting to make was that it's a whole new dynamic.
Yeah.
And
sure.
so you might not know that you didn't have a good relationship because you were always doing things, and you were communicating, and it was all transactional, and you were getting things done, and you didn't know you didn't have a good relationship until you didn't have to get things done anymore. Now you are retired. Now the house is done. Now the grass is done. Now the cars are purchased. The kids are off and they did finish college and they're on their own 2 feet. So you didn't know that you didn't have a great relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're faced with, once again, we talked about the last episode, you got to talk about what's in the room, and what's in the room right now is this is not the best. So, now we have to be intentional about making sure this becomes everything that we want it to be.
Yeah, that's why I was intentional about saying that before you get to this point, you have to be mindful of nurturing the relationship beyond the doing, nurturing the relationship, because you'll get to a point where everything that you have to do and everything that you have done is no longer required of you. So then what do you have? And that's why it's important for you to build the relationship along the way. So you have to find ways to be intentional about preparing yourself today if you haven't gotten there yet, and it's coming, or if you are there, preparing yourself for what are we going to be when all of the doing is done?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to be? And you have to build on that starting today, like starting immediately, because there will be time will come when all of the stuff, and it may not look like it if you're just starting the journey, but time will come when all this stuff is over and you're like, okay, now what do we have? And I just realized I really don't even like you. So now what happens? So you have to be building on those things along the way. I want to make sure too that when we talk about loss, I want us to know grief that we're talking about isn't just navigating grief through death. We're not talking about navigating death as much, but it's also a loss when your roles change, when your routines change, when the things that you're accustomed to change, and it's not what it has always been or what it used to be. And when you suffer that, it affects each person differently. Some people feel like they're not as valued or not as valuable, or that they need to find something else to do to replace that thing, when in actuality, that may not be the time for you to replace it with more doing. It may be time for you to replace it with more feeling and more building and more communication and more of the things that would bring you closer together as a couple.
Well, and you need to have that conversation. If you feel a loss, you need to talk about it, because the person may not know that they pull back or they're doing something different. So it comes back to communicating what it is that you're feeling in that moment. And so you can't hold somebody responsible for something you haven't told them. And we said that a number of times. So make sure you're communicating what you're feeling as you're transitioning from the noise to a different kind of noise, or even the quiet.
Yeah. So I want to say too, think about as well doing some check-ins when you know that there are transitions. I don't know that anyone has asked me about how I'm feeling since I've retired. Like, what does that feel like? Or how am I feeling with not doing what I did for 32 years? Like, I don't know if I would have an answer if I was asked, because I don't know if I've taken, I mean, it's only been a couple months, so I get it. But you know, doing something for over 30 years and then just not anymore. Yeah, that's a loss. That's a loss. Now, it's a welcome loss. Don't get it wrong. Don't get me twisted. Don't get it wrong. I'm happy about it. But it is a different feeling. It's a different phase of life. And you have to be able to be real about people are transitioning, and that is a loss. Even though it's a joyous loss, sometimes maybe not, because it's a routine that you're accustomed to. So that may give some mixed emotions and mixed motions too, and mixed feelings. So, it's sometimes helpful to ask those check-in questions. We talked about, doing a grief check-in and asking, how are you doing with this? How are you feeling about that? What are some things that I can do to help in this transition? Do you need anything in this transition?
Well, and I don't know if anybody's asked, clearly nobody's asked you, but I know people have asked me. And then generally they fill in the blank as it relates to you. They'll say, well, what is she doing now to retire? Well, I know she's doing something else. So because she's always on the move. And so if there is something that's different about your transition, then you're going to have to tell people that. So once again, it comes to telling people how you feel about that. And then hopefully that will invite them to ask the question, even when they think they know the answer.
Well, I always say check on your strong friends. Check on the ones that are always busy, because they're the ones that nobody checks on, and they may not have time to pause and check on themselves. So, or they may not have taken the time to pause and check on themselves, and they may need someone to do that. Maybe they're not accustomed to doing that. And I don't know that I would walk up to anyone and just randomly say, hey, you want to know how I feel about retirement? I don't think I would randomly do that. I don't think that that's something that, matter of fact, let me change that from think. I know I wouldn't randomly just walk up and say, let me tell you about how I feel about retirement. I don't think that's it. I just think in general conversation, when in any situation, I'm using my retirement because it's easy and I'm in it, so I can talk about that. But in any situation where there's a transition, you may want to ask people, you need to be concerned enough to ask people, I noticed that this transition has happened, especially if you're in a relationship with them. They're your friends. Ask, I know your child moved out. How are you feeling about that? Or how is that going? What are some adjustments that you're making? Or how are you navigating that space? Or something where, I know that your child just deployed, or something where, I know that you're both retired now. How is that going for you all? Or how are you feeling with having him home all the time or having her home all the time? Those kinds of things. So sometimes the people around you, and if you're around people that are making these transitions or experiencing these transitions, ask them. Take a second and ask.
Open the door to that dialogue.
Open the door to that dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Open the door to that dialogue. So when we talk about, we want to make sure that we are giving people support as they're making those transitions as well. So when you think about change, really doesn't just shift your life. It often tests your love. It tests what you thought you were standing on the whole time, because sometimes when the noise is gone, you realize that that foundation is not as solid as you thought it was, because it's absent of the responsibilities of relationship. And when I talk about the responsibilities of relationship, it's those things that you do as part of routine as opposed to the responsibilities in the relationship, which are those things where you are talking about, who am I in this space? How am I with this person? And building that relationship. So just being mindful of those things.
And you're going to have to ask those questions. What does this look like to you when it's a great relationship? What does it look like when it's a good relationship? And then be prepared for the answers, because they may or may not be some answers that you want to hear.
Yes.
And so when you've been busy doing things for years, you may have been great at doing things, but now the noise is gone, and now you're going to have to start talking about how you feel about something. That could be a totally different situation.
Yeah, the house gets bigger when people aren't in it. The space gets bigger. So you got to figure out how and silence gets louder, because before you had other things to distract you. But if there's nothing going on with the two of you, then that that's exacerbated. Like you see it now. It's nothing else to distract you. So be mindful of those things when they're happening. And, ask yourself, who are we now that we're not the problem solvers, that we're not the taxi cabs, that we're not all of these other things every single day? Who are we now? Who are we as individuals now? And who are we as a couple now? And how do we redefine that? And not being afraid to redefine it if you need to. How do you redefine that? How do you reshape that? What are those things that we need to talk about that give us clarity about who we are now to each other and with each other?
And that's a good one too, because there could very likely be expectations about things changing once somebody retires. If they were super busy before, there may be an expectation that now that they're not super busy, that they'll do X, Y, and Z. But you're going to have to communicate what X, Y, and Z is, because once again, you can't hold them accountable for things that you haven't articulated.
Right.
But there could be an expectation. And then if you don't articulate that, now that expectation turns into resentment.
Absolutely.
Because you said, well, now you have time to do all that now, and then you're still doing something different. But if you haven't talked about what that thing is that you want them to do, then that puts an undue burden on them because you haven't actually talked about it. So talk about everything.
Right.
Even if you think it's small, it might be small to you, but it could be big to the other person.
Good point.
So have a conversation about it.
Good point. And don't commandeer my time. Like, don't assume that because I no longer do this, that I no longer have anything to do. So once you decide that, then you're now devaluing me. So as you know, I run a business. I work. I still work. So yes, I'm retired from my job, but I run a business. So making assumptions about now what a person would be available to do. I know we talked to a couple who, their faces are in my head right now as we're talking about this, but we talked to a couple who that was a thing. This person retired and the other person felt as though now you should be doing A, B, C, D, and E, not thinking that one, they retired medically, so they have some health concerns and some limitations health-wise, but then they also don't have the flexibility and the time that you thought, because they're also running a business. They're also getting a business up off the ground. So with that happening, that free time that you thought would come just because they don't go to work anymore, it's been replaced with some other things. So you got to be mindful of when those shifts happen and what that looks like when people are actually adjusting in those spaces. Because, facing these midlife shifts, purpose changes, desires change, identities change, all those things change, and you have to figure out how can you do that together, and how are you respectful of those things and communicating what that looks like from both perspectives.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot. There's a lot involved, and all of it is real. All of it are real issues that you're dealing with. But the only way they're ever going to get dealt with is if you talk about them. So you have to talk about them, even if it's difficult. Have the difficult conversations.
And you got to learn each other's voice again, because again, the voice of a working person and voice of a parent, and I'm using retirement just because it's on the top, but I want you to think about any transition. So I don't want to just limit it to retirement, but or to parenting, or whatever, because those aren't the only things. But when transitions happen, when there's a loss of a spouse, or when there's a transition and you now are becoming a caregiver, those kinds of things are adjustments as well. And you have to be able to have a safe conversation around what that looks like and feels like, and how we're going to navigate that collectively, how we're going to navigate that as a team. Mm-hmm. Because the team doesn't go away just because dynamics shift. And if it does, then you got a weak team. So you got to then work on that, what that looks like. But in either case, you want to make sure that you are rekindling and that you're putting time and effort into maintaining the relationships underneath all of the transitions.
Very important. Rekindling friendship and intimacy beyond roles and routine. Now that the noise is gone, and we've talked about that at length here about what the noise can be, and it can be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And it's going to go away. It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Correct.
And so what are you going to fill that void with when that happens is what you have to have a conversation about now. And then start building some of the infrastructure for that before it actually happens.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is building the infrastructure before it happens. You have got to start building a strong enough relationship that it can withstand shifts in the way that you do life. You're still doing it with the same people, but the way that you do it will shift. So you need to have some real conversations around what that will look like when that shift is made.
Okay.
Yep. So another thing that I want to just mention very quickly is you have to figure out how to support each other without losing your rhythm as well. So what does support look like? And you have to ask that question. How can I support you in this new phase of your life? How can I support you in that? What are some things that I can do to help you? What are some things that I can do to help you manage the difference? Again, I'm going to go back and say, check on your strong friends, because those are the people that never get checked on. And those are the people that have some pretty heavy burdens because they're carrying yours as well as their own. So be mindful of that when you are looking at people that you think may not need that simple question or may not need your help. They do. So please go and ask, and you be the catalyst for that, because if they're accustomed to you needing things or them having to be there for you, chances are they've already made up in their mind that they don't want to give you something else to deal with or something else to worry about. So they're going to just deal with it on their own. And that's not always healthy. I had to learn that the hard way.
Realigning schedules, hobbies, and rest on purpose. And that was one we listened to a video about a week ago when it talked about 9 things you need to get out of your bedroom in order to rest and in order to kind of plan for the next day. And so some of those things were very basic. Some of those things we've already implemented. Some of those things were hard. Some of the things we've already implemented also. And most things that are going to create growth are going to be hard. So that's a good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that the growth happens outside of your comfort zone. So
yeah, I'm clear.
A lot of things
I'm not comfortable.
Yeah. So a lot of things that you need to do, you don't want to do. And so, but a couple of things we've already implemented already, like opening the blinds every day and getting sunlight in there. Removing clutter. So make sure if you got something that's broken in your room, make sure you get rid of that. That's a whole part of realigning, not only your schedule, but realigning your workspace, making sure that you don't have work stuff in your bedroom. And so it's all a part of the larger process of transitioning from one thing to the next.
Yeah, use every room for the purpose that it's created. So if your bedroom is created for rest and relaxation and intimacy and time together and togetherness, then use it for that. Use it for that. And don't bring work in there. Mm-hmm. And that one was hard for me because I would work. I work everywhere. I would be working everywhere. Another one was and this one was the one that was hard for me because we finally a few years ago got rid of a house phone. Thank God. I know we were the last people on earth with a house phone. We finally got rid of that. And with that, it was just, why? Because when it would ring, we wouldn't even answer it. I mean, it was spam. So why did we have it? So anyway, that's a whole nother story. But with that, I always have a hard time with disconnecting from my devices at night. So because I have an aging parent, I have a lot of things that go on, and we have children. So, and their lives don't stop at 9:00 at night. So if there are things that go on, then we have to make sure that we're available. But it doesn't mean you have to be available to everything and everybody all the time in those spaces. So one of the things that was suggested was to turn your notifications and things off at a certain time. And I've done that. I have not turned the ringer off, which I normally don't have my ringer on anyway. I only turn it on at night because I feel like if someone is calling me late at night, then I need to be able to answer it. But other than that, I turn the other notifications off. So that may be something. Haven't gotten the TV out of the bedroom yet. I don't know about that one. I love 7 or 8 of the 9 things. Don't know about that. Because again, you got to figure out what relaxes you. And granted, I don't need to watch some of the stuff that I watch late at night, but I will say that, why you made that face?
You just let people talk sometimes. They'll just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, and they'll talk themselves right into it.
I'm not talking myself into that. But what I have done is start watching things that give me like laughter and joy before I go to bed, as opposed to some of the blood and guts. I like crime shows. I just do. So anyway, but I cut those off at a certain time now. So there, again, a lot of things, that's a whole nother story. But to make this short, let's just say that
it's too late.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't be disrespectful. So remember that you want to make sure that you're sharing the intention as you go through this, and that you're making sure that you're able to keep in mind that transitions will happen, and you build a foundation so when they do happen, that they do not rock your relationship, or that you realize that there's absolutely nothing there. You have to work on that part of all of your relationships, your friendships, everything, your romantic relationships. You have to work on the relationship part of that and be intentional about that. And I wasn't always good at that. And I had to apologize to my friends. I had to apologize to a lot of people because I wasn't always good at being intentional about letting them know how valuable and how important they are. And that now has to be a priority. I've made that a priority so that people will know that I value them, so that if the noise ever stops, we still have something to stand on, something stronger than the stuff that we do. It has to be the people that we are, the people who we are as people, and how we navigate our relationships is critical. It's critical in that space. So with that being said.
All right. Anything else?
Nope, not for me.
All right. Well, once again, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to Dinner for Two. We hope that if any of this has been helpful, that you will like, share, and give us the feedback that's so critical to us becoming better and being more impactful.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. And again, comment. Please comment. Like, share, and comment. We read the comments. Some of the episodes that we're coming up with have come from comments. So please make sure that you're sharing your comments. We'd love to hear from you. You matter to us. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.